Alright friends, how's it going out there? Okay, it's your local neighborhood noodle here, and today we're talking about percent or percentages. The symbol that we use for percent is the little one that looks like this. You may have seen it before, like that. Sometimes you'll have a little connection. Now percent means, literally, per means of, and cent means hundred. So of 100 or out of 100. Do you recognize that cent is the same little syllable, the same little root syllable that we use for century, or cents like pennies, or centurion? All those have to do with hundreds, right? A century is 100 years. You have 100 cents in a dollar, right? Okay, so when we're thinking about percentage, we're talking about a fraction with a denominator of 100. Okay. So suppose I have something like 34 as the numerator and 100 as the denominator. The first thing to do is to change this into a decimal. We go 0.34. How did I know to put the point here and the 34? Because since this has two zeros, I take this number and I want to shrink it by a factor of those two place values, by a factor of 100, 10, 100. And that gives us the proper placement of the decimal. See, 34 over 100 is a small amount, right? If you had 34 things out of 100 things, you wouldn't even have a whole 100 things, right? You wouldn't have one complete set. So you have less than a set. And that's what the 0.34 shows you. To go from the decimal, it's easy. To make that, we call that 34%, or 34 out of 100. Right? So anytime you see the decimal like this, you can adjust it to make the percentage like that. See? Let me give you another example. 17 over 100. First, we're going to write that fraction as a decimal. Can you do it? Yes, you can. It's going to be 0.17. And then to change that to a percentage, look at this, 17%. Is that pretty easy for you? Good. I don't want math to be tough for you. I want you to go step by step and see, I understand this, I understand this, I understand this. Right? You should be doing along on your paper, because working with a pencil or writing it down, that really helps us remember. Let's try a little tricky one. How about 3 out of 100? Well, when I move the place value here, I remember I have to have 2 spots behind that decimal, right? So I'm going to move this 2 spots. Oh, that means I'm going to have a 0.03. That's it. You could think 3 pennies out of 100 pennies. Well, that's going to be 3 cents. And we would call that 3%. Right? Okay, I will do one more here. This is the warm-up, and we'll show you some little curveballs. Here we go. How about 54 over 100? That would be easy, 0.54. And then that would be 54%. Okay, no problem. I want you to have a good idea of how to go from a fraction to the decimal to the percent. You should be able to go back and forth between these. You can test yourself by writing a percent and changing it back to a fraction and changing it to a decimal and going back and forth between those 3 versions. They're all different ways to say the same thing, which we're talking about an amount. In percentages, you may not automatically have 100 as the decimal, as the denominator, right? Suppose we start off with something that's not 100. Say I have 7 over 10. Well, when I change this to a decimal, I'm going to call that 0.7. Why is it 0.7? Because look, a 10 denominator, I only have a 10th place, so that's 0.7. But I want to be I want it to be out of 100. So what do? Well, I'm going to move this over 2 spots. I'm going to have the 7, that's here, and then what's behind that? I could call that 0.70. Is 0.7 the same thing as 0.70? Yes. I can arbitrarily add zeros behind a number, and that gives me 70%. Right? Let me show you another way to do the same thing. Suppose I have, let's say, 5 over 10. Right? Well, 5 over 10, if I wanted to change that so that the denominator is 100, I'm going to have to multiply the bottom by 10, and I can increase the top by 10 as well, that same factor. We looked at this when we were talking about dealing with fractions. So 10 times 10 would give me 100, which is what I want, and 5 times 10 is 50. Now I have the proper denominator, 0.50 or 50%. Yeah. If you start with something like, how about like this, 1.3. Oh no, what do I do here? What does this mean? This means 1 whole and 3/10. Well, 3/10, if I add 0 to the top and to the bottom and change it, 30 over 100, right? Multiply this by 10, multiply that by 10. And now I see I've got 1 whole and 30 more. So that's going to be 130%. Right? You can also just do it from here. I want to move this over 2 places, so I get 130, which is equal to 130%. Yeah. It takes some practice. Now, the next thing is what happens when it's not easy to change that denominator into 100, right? What do? If the number's like 5 or 10 or 2, that's easy to grow that denominator so it equals 100. But some numbers are not that way, right? Let's look at this one here, 3/4. Now, if I wanted to change this to 100 denominator, I could do this. I'll show you the one way, and I'll tell you two different ways. So here's, what do I need to make this as 100 denominator? 4 times something. That something's going to be 25, because 4/4 make $1. So when I'm trying to change fractions, I multiply the bottom by the same thing as I do the denominator. 3 times 25 would be 75. 75 over 100 would equal to be 0.75, or I could call that 75%. That's one way to do it, right? And if you know this, if you know what to multiply by the denominator to make 100, and it's easy, go for it. That's fine. I want you to have a good idea of what's going on. But there might be cases where it's not easy to do that at all. Let's look at a case like 3/8. 3 over 8. There we go. 3 over 8. So 3 over 8, what do? If I want to change this to a percentage or even just a decimal, do you remember how to change this kind of fraction into a decimal? It's not too tough. All we do is divide the numerator by the denominator. So that means I put the numerator under my division symbol and I divide it by the denominator. Automatically I start to get decimal. Why? Because I can't I cannot divide 3 evenly by 8. So I'm going to have to use a decimal. Put one here, put it here. Now, can 8 go into 30? Yes. How many times? 3 times 8 is 24. Subtract, bring down a 6. I'll bring down another 0. 8 can go into 60, let's see, 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. And then 60 take away 54. 56 is 4. I'll bring down one more 0. Can 8 go into 40? Yes, 5 times. So I get 40, and now I have no remainder. So I know that 3/8 is equal to this decimal, 0.375. And I could call that 37.5%. Why? Because I move it over 2 spots. Right? Is it okay to have a decimal inside your percentage? Yes. Yeah. Just move it over 2 spots. Right? Going from the decimal to the percentage form. Right? Yeah. You'll want to practice with this stuff. Good. When we're thinking about percentages, I want you to also have a good idea of what this amount means. For example, here's some salt. How full is this? Well, what percentage do you think of this container has salt? Right? Is it 100% full? No, that would be all of it. If you think of this as 100 spots, how much is it? That's right, it's about half full, or we'd say 50%. Here's some with pepper. Okay, is this 100% full? No. Is it 50% full? That'd be a half. No, it's less than 50. Do you think it's, what do you think? Let's see, if I imagine that there were 100 little divisions here, how far up would it go? Yeah, maybe about 30%. Yeah. And finally, let's look at some grapefruit juice. Here we go. If this whole thing was full, it would be 100. If it was half full, is the glass half full or half empty? It would be 50%. I'd say this is about, let's see, 1, 2, yeah, maybe, what do you think? 68, 70% full. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Good luck. With math, we have to repeat these ideas over and over again, and we have to practice. So I want you to practice at home, and when you're doing this kind of work, you'll see that these methods can help you, right? If you have any questions, you can leave your comments in the section there, and also you can email me. Love to hear from you. My email is noodlemcdoodle@yahoo.com, and I'll write that on the board here. Noodle MC Doodle, all one word, @yahoo.com. Okay, take care.